Welcome into week 5 of a 7-week series that we are calling a Queen's Gambit. A gambit is a chess move. It's a calculated risk that hopefully puts your players and your pieces in an advantageous position. Now, coming in, maybe you're kicking the tires on Timber Creek at one of our locations for the first time or first time in a long time, and we're in week 5, and are you gonna be lost? No, I wanna recap you today. We're gonna recap the story by giving you just a little quick gallop through what we have experienced so far. And really, what is happening as we unpack this one book of the Bible, 66 books of the Bible written by 40 different authors over the course of 1,500 years in 3 different languages in 3 different continents. 2 of those 66 books are named after women, Ruth and Esther. This is the only book of the Bible out of all 66 that God is never mentioned. God's name is never mentioned. Prayer is not even mentioned. And what we're gonna learn is God is gonna position a variety of people in various places to carry out his gambit, whether it's clear to us or not. And as we consider the chessboard, we gotta know that God is like, he's not a piece, he's the chess master. And even though he gives us free will, he has a providential, a God-sized supernatural plan that he started with the perfect garden, but we messed it up. We disconnected ourselves from God by doing it our way over his way in any way. That's what sin is. And ever since then, he has given us consequences for sin, but he has been building a way to bring us back closer to him. The Bible is not a story about us trying to get close to God. The Bible is a story about God wanting to get close to you. And it started with the perfect garden. It's gonna end with a new heavens and new earth, and there is gonna be a whole lot of partnering with him or pushing against him in the process, but he invites you to be placed in various positions at various places, no matter your various pasts or present. God has a way of moving the chess pieces. And we see this book of Esther, we see King Xerxes, who is the antithesis of the one true king, God of the cosmos. And King Xerxes has all kinds of wealth, all kinds of generosity, all kinds of liberality. And we open the story of Esther that he has put on a 6-month party, 180-day party, where the wine is a pouring and the DJ is a Xerxes. And like it's going. And after those 180 days, what does he do? Has a hangover and sleeps for 7 days? No, he puts another party on for his closest friends. And it's in that party that he invites the queen, Vashti, to come and stand before all of his homies and wear the crown and kind of brag on her beauty. But the queen, I guess, just isn't having it because she refuses. She has this bold stand against the king. And it doesn't get her respect, it gets her banished. And Queen Vashti is taken off of the chessboard, and she is never to be heard of again. And to fill this vacancy of the queen, they don't just choose anybody. They pull together the biggest bachelor in Persia dice experience you've ever seen. So many limos, the biggest mansion, so many roses to be given out. For 12 months, they go through this process of basically galloping into the 127 provinces in the largest kingdom on the planet, and they basically take, by force, the most beautiful women out of their homes, out of their relationships. They have to be virgins because the king won't sleep with anyone that's already had their virginity taken, so they've got to be pure in that sense, and he takes them, and for 12 months, they go through milk baths. This is all in the scripture. They go through the milk baths and the ointments and the treatments and the walking and the hula hooping and the answering world peace. I mean, they do it all, okay? And sure enough, Esther, who is a Jew, is gonna hide her nationality. It's a huge part of this story. And she is gonna actually go through the world system. She's a Jew, so she shouldn't eat what they eat, but she eats it. She shouldn't sleep with someone who's not her husband, but she does it. She has to make many sacrifices that would go against the law of God in her own Jewish faith. And yet God has a way of positioning various people in various places with various levels of relationship and obedience to still carry out his gambit. And what will happen is Esther, the promoted pawn who comes out of obscurity, will actually be promoted to become the most powerful woman in the land. Part of how she gets there is by her cousin, Mordecai. When Esther was a child, she is orphaned from her family. And her cousin Mordecai takes her on as his own daughter and basically is a step-in father for her. Now, Mordecai got onto the scene last week, and we consider Mordecai the bishop. In chess, the bishop is limited in his moves, but they are able to move diagonally through the game. And you see Mordecai moving diagonally through this story. He stays very consistent all the way through this story. And last week, we uncovered a major national potential scandal where as Mordecai was at the city gates, or pardon me, the palace gates, two officers in the king's court are talking back and forth in whispers, and they're planning to assassinate the king. Mordecai hears about it, and he could keep it to himself, but instead he goes to Esther. Esther tells the proper authorities. They let Xerxes know, and Xerxes has a report done. And those guys go and Starsky and Hutch gallop out of there, and they investigate the whole deal. And we pick up the story that when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. Like, not a whole lot of grace here. They were basically, they became, you know, it was Big Thana and Teresh. They became Big Thana kebab and Teresh kebabs, and they were killed. The Bible says that this was all recorded like on the front of the New York Times. The book of the history of King Xerxes was like the news source of the day. And all of this is recorded. And so it makes sense that in the next chapter, verse 1 starts out, after these events, King Xerxes honored, and you would think that in this moment, who's he gonna honor? Of course he's gonna honor Mordecai the bishop, because Mordecai thwarted the assassination plot. But this is where we get the title of today's message, Plot Twist in Persia. Because after these events, King Xerxes didn't honor Mordecai. He forgets about Mordecai, and he honored Haman the Agagite. Every location, everywhere, say it loud with me. He honored Haman the Agagite. Now, Haman, the Agagite, is the antagonist of this story. He's the evil villain of this story. He is the enemy in the flesh. Haman on the chessboard is considered the knight. Now, the knight is what looks like the horse. And the knight has an unpredictable movement. Limited movement, basically an L shape all around, an L anyway, upside down, left, right, you name it. They can go 2 moves forward or 2 moves backwards and 1 move left or right, or 1 move forward, 1 move backward, 2 moves left or right. The knight is the only piece on the board that can actually leap over other players. No other position and piece has that authority on the chessboard. And so what we're gonna see is Haman is gonna leap over Mordecai. Haman is going to leap into some big situations. Haman is gonna be unpredictable and yet unpredictably predictable in what drives him. Next week, we will unpack the carbon monoxide that is killing Haman and maybe even killing me and you. Listen to me. I think next Sunday might be one of the most important messages you will ever hear in your life. I think next Sunday's message will probably be one of the most important messages you ever hear in your life. The carbon monoxide of sin. But Haman enters this scene today, and after these events, King Xerxes honored this guy, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. This is the vice president to the president. This is Joseph to Pharaoh. This is the prime minister to the king of England, and he is the boss under the main boss. And all the royal officials at the king's gate, they had to kneel down and pay honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. Pause. You shouldn't have to really command someone to kneel if you really have the authority. So what you're seeing already is there's like this authority that Haman demands, and even the king has to kind of put his foot down because people aren't automatically giving them the respect. Like, there's some people that you know deserve your respect. You don't have to be asked to give them the respect. They walk into the room and you're a there you are person with them, right? And there are other people that walk in the room and like, you know, they become a here I am person. But there are those people that deserve honor. And yet, Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Mordecai's at that same gate. And Mordecai, even though what's he doing? He's putting himself in the crosshairs of potential issues. Write this down if you're taking notes. Mordecai's stand triggered a national crisis. Hey, listen to me, Christ follower. Don't think for a second that standing for certain things will all of a sudden unlock a chain reaction of supernatural miracles in your life. What it might unlock is issues. It might unlock tension. Talking with a great friend that I happened to see her and her husband at Starbucks the other day. And we were talking and they're saying, man, I've changed my life and I've given like a deeper relationship to Jesus. And like the friends that I have, I thought they would be happy for me. And they actually are kind of pushing away on me. And it's weird. Sometimes when you take a stand, don't think that all of a sudden everything's gonna be hunky-dory. Sometimes you take a stand and you get crucified. But there's something going on here. What made him not bow? It could be, it's not that he's not allegiant to the king, right? Because he actually thwarted the assassination plot. So we know he's faithful to King Xerxes. It could be past conflict. The truth is that Haman the Agagite, the reason why we hear the name Agagite is, remember how Xerxes has 127 provinces? You don't get those by winning the lottery. You get those by taking them over, dominating them. And there was one people group called the Amalekites who had a king over them in that area called King Agag. So Haman is a descendant of royalty in the Amalekite kingdom. And so probably what happened is through a political connection, through a political merging of those thrones, Haman by ex officio becomes more important because there's some kind of agreement made with the Amalekite people and the Agag, King Agag, the Agagite king, to get Haman where he is. We don't know why he wouldn't bow, but we just know he stood and it caused a national crisis. Now, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. The original language says he popped off. He was triggered. He was enraged, ticked. And yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, though, he wasn't just enraged, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. When he found out that Mordecai was a Jew, it enraged him even further. And so instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Now, if we're not careful, friends, we read this story and we go have chips and salsa at the Mexican restaurant. And I want you to think about how your thoughts would slightly shift if I exchanged this one word with a word that would make more sense to you. That Haman looked for a way to destroy all the white people, all the black people, destroy all the Christians, destroy all the Republicans, the Democrats, to destroy all of the residents of the state of Texas. And you read this story and it becomes a little bit more real. The Bible isn't about you, it's about God, but it's about God getting to you. But don't think that God's not trying to teach us something, that all of us have a delicacy about life. And we need to know that there has been a past and a history, not just in this nation, but many nations, that people that stand for certain things get wiped out. It happens. And we're not far from it. Haman said to King Xerxes, he goes to the king, he's so enraged, he says, look, there's a certain people, they're dispersed among the people in all the provinces, your kingdom, who keep themselves separate. What's wrong with that? Well, yeah, but here's, you gotta know, their customs are different from those of all the other people. They don't obey the king's laws. Who says they don't obey the king's laws? Mordecai is one of these people and actually thwarted the whole assassination. But isn't it interesting how people that want their way will not, they always want to stack. If anybody comes to you and says, hey, there's some people talking and here's how they feel, tell them to shut up in Jesus' name. Say, oh, well, I can't, they're not talking to me, you're talking to me. Okay, do not try to make your issue bigger to your boss by saying, a lot of people are coming to me. Careful in doing that. You have to own your own junk, own your own stuff. If you have a conviction, own your conviction and don't hide under anonymous other people. Well, a lot of people are talking these days. Just own it. But that's what Haman's doing. Haman's trying to make it about the king and his issues and these people and their issues and not Haman's own enragement because the dude just wouldn't bow. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. So if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy him. And here's what I'll do. Haman's like he's putting more into the pot. I'm gonna give you 10,000 talents of silver. Silver is trading for $32 an ounce today. That is the equivalent of 384 million US dollars. I'm gonna give you to let me wipe out the Jewish people, I'm gonna pay you $384 million into the administrators for the royal treasury. Now, how does the king respond? So the king took his signet ring, the one that once it's pushed into the hot wax on a law, it is signed and sealed and delivered, and in the laws of Medes and Persians, there's no going back. He gave it to Haman, the enemy of the Jews, gave him so much. Careful, parents, who you're delegating your authority to, who have the license to speak into your children's lives. We don't have signet rings, but we do give authority to people to speak into. When every single kid that leaves in the morning and goes to a school, you have given them authority to speak. So careful the kind of authority you're allowing to speak over your kids and into your kids. But king says, keep the money. Dude's rich. Keep the money, keep the 384 million, and do with the people as you please. Is this crazy? The author is wanting to show us this is not the kind of king you want. A king that will try to show you, I'm a liberal king, I'll give you all the wine you want for 6 months. But the moment he has the opportunity to save some people that he might think might be an inconvenience to him, he's ready to wipe them out. That's not the kind of king we need to pledge allegiance to. We have a better king. So what happens is dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces. Interestingly enough, the whole postal service was invented by King Xerxes and this province. All of the routes and everything is started in this province. The order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, and to plunder their goods. Babies are gonna be pulled from their crib and killed in the streets. Women are washing the clothes in the river, and they're gonna be trampled, raped, and murdered. Men are putting the cabinets up in the cabinet shop, and they're gonna be drugged by a horse until they're dead. All on one day, young and old. Anybody can do it. It's free reign on the Jews. And then they're gonna be able to take everything out of their house and put it in for themselves because of this one law. We are in a political season, you may not realize that, and personalities are at all-time high. Not gonna vote for that person because of their personality, not gonna vote for that person, or I am gonna vote for that person because of their personality. And I invited us last week to not trust in the Lord and lean left on our own understanding, or trust in the Lord and lean right on our own understanding, but do what Scripture says, is trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and not just be about personalities that are at play, because personalities will come and go. They've happened 61 different elections. This will be our 61st. This will be our 47th president, but our 61st election in these United States. Personalities come and go. Policies last a while. And you have to understand what's going on, what signet rings are gonna be pushed into the wax and propelled forward long after the next 4 years. And if you don't know, if you've just been blue because you were raised blue, or you've just red because you were raised red, or you just like the popcorn of watching it and you'll just kind of decide, get engaged, everybody. You gotta know. You need to be, God has placed you in a position in various places at various times to carry out his plans. And so when Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes. This is a physical representation of grieving. And he went out into the city wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. Pause, can I just tell you something? This king who's so liberal, let's party, let's give you everything you want. Oh, I want a king like that who's gonna cut my taxes. I want a king like that who's gonna give me what I want when I want. I want a king like that. Is also like, don't come to me with your issues. But do you know there's a greater king? Instead of not being able to enter with sackcloth and ashes in front of the king's presence, there's a king that says, carry your burdens to me. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened. Cry out to me. Cast your cares on me because I care for you. If you have thought that God is waiting for you to get it right before he blesses you, you were introduced to the wrong God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Jeremy, Janet, Graham, and Sage, the God of Timber Creek Church is the kind of God that doesn't wait leaning over the walls of heaven for you to get all your stuff right before he blesses you. He has already scooped you up. He has already poured his own son out for you. He is saying, come boldly to me. You don't have to be afraid of me. You can get close to me, but sometimes we're afraid of that, and so we don't show up to church, or we keep it at arm's length, or we're not willing to do these things because we have a different understanding of God. This story is trying to show you who the one true king really is and how he really moves and how he really loves. But Mordecai is distraught. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, through that mail system, there was great mourning among the Jews with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So remember, Mordecai's stand triggered a national crisis. Like, shouldn't he have just bowed at that moment? Nevertheless, it did trigger this enragement in Haman. So should we just kind of go silently into the night? No, but here's what else it did. A national crisis triggered a spiritual posture. Something began to shift across the entire nation that was a spiritual posture. Can I ask you something? What's your posture? What would your kids say your first posture is when they do something stupid in the house? The Greek word for stupid is stupid, okay. Is the posture like, oh, junk, I hope dad doesn't find out? Can they come and tell you? Does dad kick open doors? Does mom shame him into the ground? What's the posture? What's the spiritual posture of your heart right now? Some of you could be easily described, your political posture can be easily described, from messages on Facebook to your own opinions. But what about your spiritual posture in all this? What about a humility? What about a willingness to say, God, your kingdom come, your will be done? In the Texas state capitol, I was taking a tour a few years ago with 40 other business leaders. And as they were giving me the tour, there was a 19-year-old page. His name was Alex, and he was giving us a tour. And we went to the House of Representatives for the state, 155 chairs there. And then we went into the Senate chambers, and there's 31 there. And he said to us as we were about ready to enter the Senate chamber, this is in your state, Texas state capitol. He said, watch your step as you enter in. There's steps into this entryway, and the entryway is a little bit small. I'm not sure why they made it so small, and those stairs are not even, so just be careful. And somebody said, why are they not even? He said, I don't think they could actually cut them. They were granite, so I don't think they could cut them all the same size. Oh, bless Alex's heart. Bless Alex's heart. And so I pulled Alex aside because I didn't want to say it in front of anybody else. It wasn't meant to embarrass him. But I say, hey, Alex, can I help you with this? Because I know why this is. Because in several different chambers across the nation, stairs are the exact same way and entry is the exact same way. Because in the temple of the Bible, the steps that lead up to the temple were designed to be staggered and different height. And it wasn't because of architecture, it was to slow people down, that they would slow down as they were about ready to enter the temple, or they would stumble. So the reason they're staggered is a biblical reason to slow them down as they're about ready to make laws. And the reason why that entrance is so small, it wasn't built because everybody was only 5'4" at the time. It was built small so that every single senator is walking into the chamber to make laws that will be in effect, that they would humble themselves. They would bow and walk in, because it was a physical representation of slowing down and humbling themselves. Oh my God, how far we have drifted. And I don't mean just politically, I mean in our marriages, in our families, with our children. What would the spiritual posture need to look like for us to slow down on the steps, getting the last word in edgewise? What would it look like to when you enter into an argument with your spouse, that you take the lower place for just a second before you enter into what could be policies that you say and words that you won't get back for years to come? I don't know why he stood, but it triggered something. It had a spiritual posture. Can I invite you? Our last first Wednesday of the year is this Wednesday. First Wednesday is a spiritual posture platform where we take a little bit more time and we just give honor to whom honor is due, our one true God. We worship together. A friend of mine who's planting churches across Africa is going to be here to preach. Powerful message. You don't want to miss it. I know you have to travel, Nacogdoches. What would it look like to have a spiritual posture to say, hey, I'm going to make the drive, Mount Enterprise, Even Groves. You can watch us online if that works for you, 2 hours away. But I want to invite you, make plans to be here at our final First Wednesday. It's going to be 24 hours after having an election across this nation. It's going to be important for the church to come together and worship the one true God and pray, no matter what happens, to just pray. And so I invite you to be here. I will tell you this, both a national crisis did trigger the spiritual posture, but both events triggered a providential chain reaction. His stand created chaos. The spiritual posture was happening, but both of those events moving forward created a providential chain reaction that we're going to see take place. So when Esther's in the palace, pushed away from all this. When Esther's attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. Mordecai's all in ashes, and he's in like a potato sack, and he's laying down at the king's gate. I don't know what's wrong with him. Guess what Esther does? She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Look at Esther's physical response to a heart issue. Have you ever tried to put a duct tape or a Band-Aid over an issue in your marriage that's more of a heart issue with you or with them? But we love the appearances, don't we? We operate in crisis, but sometimes that crisis, we just put a Band-Aid on the crisis versus stepping away and figuring out, okay, what is really going on here? Well, then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her. She ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai. Why is he doing what he's doing? And Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave Hathach a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. Pause. This is crazy. Esther is in the palace. It was in the palace that this edict was written and sent out. And yet she is absolutely unaware of what's happening right under her nose. I'm telling you, there are so many of us that you're going to vote blue or you're going to vote red, and you don't have a clue on policy. You don't have a picture of truly what is at stake in the regards of not just everything at stake, but even the biblical realities that we're dealing with. If you say, uh-oh, Pastor, you're getting too political, you need to rewind and go watch last week's message, and then send me an email to my email address that I share about in that message. Mordecai told Hathach to urge Esther, no, you can't. Look, you got to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Can I just say something to you, friend? Some of you, that's how you feel when you walked into the doors of a church today, that really what you need to do is you need to beg for mercy from God, or the walls will cave in. That's not the kind of God that you serve. He's quick to forgive. He's slow to anger, as some are. He's patient with you. You don't have to be afraid of coming into his presence. We actually get to enter his presence with thanksgiving in our hearts. We get to enter his courts with praise because he's a good God. And when you feel like you got nothing to praise about, and you can enter his court with sackcloth and ashes, and he'll see you where you are. That's the God we serve. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said, and then she instructed him to say, this would be a whole lot faster if they were just texting back and forth, but they didn't have text. There was no X, okay? Here's what Esther says to her cousin. Cousin, stand in, Dad. All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces, they know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law. You know this, Morty. You know it. One law, and here's the law, that they be put to death. Do you realize, cousin, what you're asking me to do here? She goes on to say, the only exception to this rule is for the king, that when they come into the presence, that he would extend the gold scepter to them and spare their lives. Otherwise, if they step in and he doesn't push the royal scepter out, the king's guards on both sides are gonna slice their throat. And now we get a triple down. We don't just have a single dog dare or a double dog dare. We got a triple dog dare. You don't even know, because here's what else you don't know, Mordecai. 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. That doesn't mean that the king's just been busy with his locomotives in his train room. What this means is he's not asked her to be with him. The king has hundreds, if not over 1,000 women in his harem. And they're not there to read bedtime stories to kids. They are his political trophies and sexual robots. He has not been celibate for 30 days. He's not been asking Esther to be with him and sleep with him and have sex with him for 30 days, to be in his presence for 30 days. But he's going to get what's his. And so what we have is Esther's paradox. We have Esther's tension that she's gonna live in now, that, like, you know that I could be killed, and I don't even know if he's interested in me anymore. You're asking me to risk what? Don't you remember what I had to go through? Don't you remember what I had to say yes to and what I had to say no to get where I am? And now you want me to risk this? And here's her paradox. If she risks losing the palace by stepping forward, if she risks losing the palace, she might lose everything, because she might be killed for even entering into the king's presence. But if she doesn't risk losing the palace, if she doesn't step forward and be courageous and bold for her people, she will lose everything, because it's gonna get found out she's one of the Jews, because the law is barreling down upon them. One day is counting down at a time until there is a national purge. So let me ask you, we may not be in this situation, but let me just ask you a couple questions real quick. What are you pursuing? Think about that. Very first thing that comes to your mind, what are you pursuing? And I don't mean bad, like you can pursue stuff. Stability, I'm pursuing a number in my checkbook. I'm pursuing love. Some of you are looking for love in all the wrong places. You're looking for acceptance. You're pursuing the next job. You're pursuing the dollar. You're pursuing the promotion. You're pursuing family. You're pursuing fun. You're pursuing the kids' activities. You're pursuing the scholarship. You're pursuing the value. You're pursuing the real estate investment. You're pursuing the affair. You're pursuing the hiding. You're pursuing the temptation. What are you pursuing? Just kind of think about what you're pursuing. What are you afraid of losing? Can I tell you that Jan and I feel like we're in a little bit of that paradox too? Like, when we became the pastors, our daughter was 11, our son was 6. When we moved here to become on staff, our daughter was less than 2 years old, and how fast the time goes. And now our daughter's 21 years old and graduating from college in December. Our son is now 16, and the moment he turns 16, there's this freedom that comes with responsibility. But like when they can begin to drive themselves here and there, like there's a whole lot of like, I feel like we've lost a little bit of an anchor. Like we had that time where we would drop them off at school and pick them up, and now that's like that. I didn't see it coming. Janet didn't see it coming. Why did we not see it coming? Because we're like you didn't see it coming either. and yet it came. And so part of us are feeling like we're losing, like, oh, we had trick-or-treaters come over to our house and ring our doorbell many times on Thursday. And it was the first time that our kids have not trick-or-treated. And we're looking at each other like feeling lost, to be honest. And yet God is stepping us into a new day, but man, how do I deal with that? What am I afraid of losing? What am I obsessed with protecting? What are you willing to protect? Is it a secret? Is it your independence? Is it your last word in edgewise? Bless God, I don't care who gets hurt. Are you obsessed with protecting the anger and bitterness that has got you seeking revenge on something? Friends, stop it on Facebook. Stop it. Where you're downing the other person. You're not naming them by names, but bless God, oh, you better hold me back. You're seeking accolades and affirmation from the wrong kingdom. Because that kingdom's gonna say, annihilate. That kingdom's gonna say, get them. That kingdom's gonna say, yeah, you oughta. What are you obsessed with protecting? What if I spent my life pursuing and protecting the wrong things? What if you, on your deathbed, have the privilege to look up and know that your time is soon? I guarantee you, none of you can say, man, I wish I would have memorized more of the Constitution. I wish I would have been in more blue parades or red parades. I wish I would have let that go. I wish I would have told my kids, I'm sorry. I wish I would have forgiven. I wish I would have just spent a little bit more time. I wish I would have become the person that I knew I needed to be. What if you're pursuing the wrong things? Listen, it was D.L. Moody who is given the accolades of this quote. Don't be afraid of failure. Listen to me. Don't be afraid of failure. Be afraid of succeeding in all the things that don't really matter. Be very afraid that you end your life succeeding in all kinds of stuff that is wood, hay, and stubble, and it's gonna burn up. Pursue the most important things. So what if we cross that out and we just said, what if I spent my life pursuing and protecting the right things? The right things. And can I give it to you in 4 words? I'm gonna give it to you. Well, that's your perspective. No, it's not. It's the Bible's perspective, and you can take it or leave it. I'd prefer you to take it, and your soul would prefer you to take it. 4 words that wrap it all up. Seek his kingdom first. Seek his kingdom first. All the other stuff, he works in various places with various people to carry out his plan. Seek his kingdom first. I know, but that means that I'm gonna have to change what I think about some stuff. Yeah. Good. Seek his kingdom first. Yeah, but that means that I'm gonna have to put some boundaries up. Yeah. Boundaries actually give you incredible freedom. Seek his kingdom first. But what is that gonna mean? I mean, I've been pursuing that. I know. Seek his kingdom first, and all the other things can be added. He is gonna shift your perspective on stuff if your perspective can come through the most important lens of your entire life. Seek his kingdom first. Now, Mordecai's perspective on all this as we begin to wrap up today. Mordecai's perspective, she says, I'm gonna get killed if I get in there. That gets delivered to him. He reads the letter, and he's like, ah! And he writes down his final letter to her, and he licks it, and he puts it in there, he gives it to Hagath. He says, go take it. So when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, here's what he sent back as his answer. Mordecai says, girl, do not think that because you are in the king's house, that you alone of all the Jews are gonna escape. He gives her a serious warning. Here's the warning. Your status won't protect you. You know what status is? Stats on us. Your status is stats on us. And you're keeping stats, and people are keeping stats, and we're keeping up with the stats on each other. Stats on us. Your status, and your status ain't gonna protect you. Okay, yeah, maybe you were able to go from obscurity to opulence, but don't think for a second that if the king finds out and his military finds out that you're a Jew and this edict is proclaimed and that day comes on the 13th day of the month, they're gonna wipe you out, and king can't do anything because the law cannot be repealed. And don't think for a second that if you're still able to stay in obscurity, that there's not one of these girls that went to high school with you way back in the day, Esther, that's gonna speak up before her throat is slit, saying, the queen herself is a Jew. I've got a picture of us in the yearbook right here. Like, you're not safe. It's a very serious warning. You think you're gonna make it out of this? Here's the next one. If you remain silent at this time, if you don't speak up at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, comma, not period. But that's good to know. God has a move. God has a plan. And he's never seen the righteous forsaken. He will arise from another place if you don't do it. But you and your father's family will perish. Listen, friends, don't you think for a second that you and I don't have a sobering reality to deal with too in everyday life. And here's the sobering reality. God will move with or without you. No matter who's no matter who's in the Oval Office, behind the desk, God will still be on the throne. He will still move without you. And sometimes he moves with blessings. And sometimes he moves with exile. And these Jews are there because they did not move with God. They did it their own way, and they are reaping the rewards of doing it their own way. And now we get the most famous phrase in all of the book, one of the most famous phrases that you've heard in all kinds of different settings. Queen Elizabeth has shared this phrase. Abraham Lincoln used this phrase in a speech. Martin Luther King Jr., Sir Winston Churchill. Who knows, Mordecai says, that maybe you've come to your royal position, or the word originally is brought to your royal position. She didn't just choose to show up at America's Got Talent. Who knows that you have been come to your royal position for such a time as this? It's a bold invitation. And it's a bold invitation that what if there's unrealized purpose in you, Esther? You think you won this beauty pageant just so you can gallivant in royal carriages? You think that you're the parent of those kids just because you happen to have a couple kids? You are in that for such a time as this. And this is where we get the Queen's Gambit. It's her moment of risk. It's her moment of stepping forward. And here's her response. Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I need help. Get together. I and my attendants will fast as you do. And when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And her risk is not in her steps that she takes, but more in her positioning of her heart, because the next line is her risk. If I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish. What got Esther to her position is not what is gonna get her into her political influence. She's not gonna be able to bat her eyes only. She's gonna have to trust. She's gonna need people seeking God with her. And if I perish, I perish. I wonder, are you willing to say that as a dad? Are you willing to say that as a man of God? Are you willing to say that as a woman of God? If I perish, but I am going to choose this day whom I am gonna serve. And there are 3 things that Esther was choosing. She's proclaiming it as the queen. By the way, 14 times she's called Queen Esther. 13 of those times are after she makes this statement. She had to stop just being the pretty little trophy and step into the boldness God had positioned her for. Men, you gotta stop acting like just one of the boys if you really wanna be the man that God has called you to be over your house. Women, you can't keep on being daddy's little princess and mama being your go-to confidant on everything if you're really gonna be the queen of that home. You gotta say no to some stuff here to say yes to the right things here. And if I perish, but as for me and my house, we're gonna do what God's called us to do. 3 things. It's a proclamation of greater surrender. When's the last time you lay your hands open and said, God, everything I have is yours. My decisions and my future and my past and my present is yours. That's what this kind of boldness looks like. It's a greater surrender. It's a proclamation of a greater mission. I'm not here just to gallivant in the royal carriages, smelling of the royal perfume. I'm here to risk my life to step forward because I'm gonna be a part. If I perish, I perish. But if I can save the people God's placed me for such a time as this. But a greater mission, you don't get to choose. Guess what? You can't pick up a greater mission. Listen to me, parents. Do you really think, oh my God, help me. Because I got sucked into the world system too. Jan and I get sucked into the world system too. You think all the stuff your kids are involved in is the mission? Really? It's the scholarship? That stuff is gonna burn up so fast and not gonna amount to a hill of flippin' beans. But we are so committed to the select ball and we don't even see the other families around us in the bleachers that you're yelling out, stop picking the daisies, or man, why aren't you swinging at that pitch? While people are also yelling out the same thing, but they're trying to figure out if they're gonna get a divorce or not because the affair's just been exposed and you're missing out on a greater mission just to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the world. But we're chasing all the stuff that's gonna be done and gone. Chase it, have fun with it, play ball. My kids did. But if ball becomes the mission, you are gonna miss it, everybody. The crown on Esther's head wasn't the mission. It was the door. It was the door to her mission. And it's a greater proclamation of greater obedience. You want to surrender to God? You want to take on a greater mission? It's going to require for you to have a greater obedience. To say, okay, God, I'm going to obey. I'm going to trust your ways are higher. And the truth is this, friends. He's going to move with or without you. What if? Could you imagine the strength you would have if instead of working on your own strength, you asked God for more strength? Could you imagine the peace that you could have if you stopped spending so much energy trying to control everything and worry so much and be so afraid and let the peace of God pass your understanding? Could you imagine what that could do to the knots in your back? You're so convinced that we're going to hell if red gets it. We're going to hell if blue gets it. Can you just, even now, somebody's going to get it, and it might be clear Tuesday night, it might not be. But God, no matter what happens, I'm surrendering to you with a greater mission and greater obedience that I'm going to be a follower of you first, no matter what, for such a time as this. All locations, would you close your eyes and bow your heads? Good news, you can approach his throne of grace and you don't have to be afraid. And today, maybe you've been trying to move without him. And for the first time, you'd like to invite him to be the king on the throne of your heart. He would love that. But you have to make that choice. You do that by recognizing who he is, the Son of the living God that paid the price that you should have paid for your sin, but he paid it on the cross. He died in your place. He rose again because he's a powerful God that's still living and still creating a place in heaven for you, not for what you do, but for who he is and who he is inviting you to be. But you have to accept that and receive it and follow him. And if that's you for the first time, or it's been a while, in your own words, you say, Jesus, you are Lord. You're the one who saves. I want you to be the king of my life. Help me to follow you. I don't want to move without you. I don't want to think without you. I don't want to live without you. I want to move with you. And the King of all glory will take up residence in your life. Friends, for anybody else you've been pursuing the wrong things, you can make a declaration today. Maybe you put a hand on your own heart. Maybe you grab the hand of your spouse. Maybe you put the hand on their back and you say, God, today we surrender to you, your mission, obeying you. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we ask it all in the name of Jesus, the strong Son of God. Everybody said a strong amen.